recording.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:10. First up, we have the first of two public comments. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to address the board? We'll have a second public comment at the end of the meeting as well. So, Tony, do you want to, are you able to get in there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. So just say who you are and where you live.
I'm Tony Branch. I live in Amherst, today current SAU student, and I'm here to ask about later start times. So my question is, why is it the SAU board that is bringing this forward and not the SAU board when, to my understanding, the other school districts are not as effective as what we were told on council is a 10-minute change in start time for elementary schools?
So are you actually Terry is chairing that committee, right? Or are you on the committee, Beth?
For start times?
Yeah. Did you want to
And I was actually
answer? Oh, okay, great. Do you want to answer Tony's question?
Yeah, so Amherst has K through 8 students, so it'll actually directly affect our 5 through, our 5th through 8th graders as well. So it really affects our students as well, just as much as yours. So that's why, and it's a full SAU decision, for us to change it because it affects busing of everybody. If Sauhegan's the only one that makes the change, it can make a big difference with buses. Either Sauhegan would have to go without or pay for their own buses or things like that. So it really affects all the students in the district.
I have a question. Is that
Sure. Yeah.
Today there was a straw poll of students at Sauhegan. About 250 people answered that straw poll, and it was a basic: should we change start time? Should we not? And 50 people answered that, and it came out 90% against. So my also follow-up question is: if we have full classrooms, why are we focusing on later start times and more busing and transportation costs? Because it seems that if we have full classrooms and kids going to class in their winter jackets because there's no heating in the classrooms, why are we focusing on transportation? Simple question.
So I guess I'm not totally sure the correlation. It's certainly an issue if there's cold classrooms. I think that would be news to.
I heard just today there was an issue, but it has not been an ongoing issue, but I believe today there was an issue at Sauhegan with heat.
Okay.
Or possibly even yesterday and today. We can certainly look into that. That's not something we're not focusing on, certainly. If there's a heat with the,
I think that there was with the controls, we don't monitor that with the power outage, there may be an issue with the controls, so we have somebody coming in to review those.
Okay.
So they might not be operating at
full capacity,
right?
But it is being addressed. Okay. All right. So, and as far as the later start times, that's an ongoing committee, and there's quite a lot of work to be done. I know certainly the opinions of students and community council and all the stakeholders are, those opinions are being sought, and it is not being pushed forward next year. It's contemplated for the following year. So I don't know if there was some confusion about that, but yeah, I know there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of issues to overcome before that we put in place. Did you have anything else to add, Beth? I know you're on that committee. I'm not personally on it.
I don't. My comment about transportation is if one district does it and the others don't, it directly affects transportation. Whereas if we all work together and do it or don't do it, it won't. We'll be able to work together with transportation. So it won't be.
We only have one fleet of buses, so.
I knew that was why.
Yeah.
It's the whole district doing it, but it's if Sauhegan's against it. And
yeah, I guess there's no answer. It's not happening next year. There's a lot of work to be done. So certainly, I know there's a committee. I know there's student voice on the committee. If you wanted to be involved, I'm sure they would welcome your input. So, thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Hi, my name is Marilyn Gibson.
Hi.
I just wanted to come and observe what goes on at the SAU board meetings as well as the Amherst and the Sauhegan. So I'm hoping to attend them. I want to get to know and become familiar with your strategies and tactics. I also want to give a thank you to Christine and to Adam for taking the time to meet with me and discuss certain issues or concerns that I've had about the school districts, whether it's Sauhegan High School or Amherst. I'm a resident of Amherst, been here for 26 years. I've also been a teacher for 29 years, private as well as public school. I have a lot to bring to the table. I was offered to go on to the community council on a waiting list, and I more or less sort of decided that that wasn't my cup of tea. I'd rather be more involved. So I'm here tonight to see what you guys are doing.
Well, thank you, welcome. Anyone else from the public? No? Okay, great. Thank you. We will continue with superintendent's report. So Adam unfortunately is not able to be with us tonight. He has some personal issues to take care of. So Christine is going to give the superintendent's report for SAU.
Yes, thank you. So a few updates. The AMS assistant principal, many of you already know that Jessie Harlander was moved from AMS to Claire Wilkins. And Dana Giampolo was hired as an interim assistant principal for the remainder of this year at AMS. Jessie Harlander has provided his resignation effective June 30th of this year, and Adam will have a further update soon about the hiring process for an assistant principal at AMS for next year. The Sauhegan High School principal update. Principal search process has identified a number of candidates that will be interviewed by the screening committee on February 7th. We'll be providing the Sauhegan board with an update at their next meeting. School start time update. Adam met with building principals earlier this week. It was actually a several-hour meeting, so I think they hunkered together for probably 3 or 4 hours and really looked at all of the challenges and issues with the school start time and started looking at some different strategies around schedule, especially at Sauhegan, and how we might have a more flexible schedule for students that could even allow some students to start at different times and still maintain that 2:25 dismissal. It's too early to share that work yet. We're beginning stages, kind of really brainstorming and looking at what we can do to meet needs and still also provide that later start time. And Adam's really looking to find ways to achieve their objective, which the committee worked really hard and found significant research supporting later start times. So trying to stay true to that, but also find a compromise, especially for families who might have significant needs in having their high school student end earlier and some challenges with sports. Next update is on the teacher renewal process. We started our annual teacher renewal discussions internally and plan to bring our teacher renominations to each board over the next 6 weeks. And Adam wanted to share that process. Adam always shares that one of the most important things we do here is hiring. And we work really hard to make sure that we find people that are going to be a good fit, but we also want to make sure that if someone needs to move on, that they also make that change. So we are very careful in having those deep discussions and looking at all of our staffing. So the process, the superintendent has to renominate teachers each year. Only the superintendent can choose to renominate a teacher. Any teacher who is non-renominated or non-renewed is entitled to a hearing before the board where Adam will show a reason for that non-renomination if that teacher is tenured, if they've taught with us more than 5 years, or if they were tenured elsewhere that more than 3 years. Prior to that renomination. And for those teachers that Adam does renominate, the board has to re-elect them or choose to non-re-elect them. So that's that process, and I'm sure he'll go over that too before we do that nomination piece in the board meetings. And if there are any questions, you can certainly reach out to Adam over email on any of the pieces in his report, but he'll certainly provide additional updates at future board meetings.
Just a question in light of the public comment with respect to start times.
Yeah.
Can we just remind everyone what it is that's motivating us to even go this direction in light of the challenges and some resistance from the students? The significant research
Yes.
has shown what?
Significant research shows that when schools start later, students, there's always this worry that students just stay up later, and that's not really accurate. The way a teenager's body clock typically works is that it's harder for them to go to bed earlier, so they end up going to bed later, and when a high school student has the earliest start time, you're shrinking the amount of time that that student has to be able to sleep. So a lot of the research shows that students actually do get more sleep and are, well rested. They're able, that academic achievement actually increases with later start time. There's even some research around that there are higher incidents of accidents when students are getting less and less sleep. So it's really a health, wellness, academic achievement, all of those pieces are really tied in with this later start time. And while students are used to this schedule, it's hard for them to think about making that change. And we recognize there are a lot of challenges, but we're also looking at, what scheduling changes can we make and what else makes sense. This was really brought forward at an Amherst board meeting probably 2 or 3 years ago. A parent came forward really concerned about that early start time and brought research forward, and that's why that committee was formed. So it was formed directly out of parent concerns of that really early start time. And really looking at that research and what the American Academy of Pediatrics actually recommends for students.
Do we have a timeline on when the results of that last meeting, or when we'll start to see some of the different plans? You mentioned students may be able to start earlier, they may be able to get out at the same time as they do now, and then certainly what impact that has. Just thinking off the top of my head, it sounds like different bus schedules, or they transport themselves, or it sounds like we're running 2 high schools, essentially 2 high school schedules. So those would be items that I would want to know more about.
Yeah, really interesting creative idea, and really in the beginning stages of exploring that, but all of those were part of the discussion. So when Adam is able to kind of firm up a possible schedule, there are a lot of pieces where we're really in that brainstorming stage, and now they're in the let's put this on paper and see how this might work phase. But we have students that have free periods in the middle of the day, where if we were able to condense some pieces or look at adjusting, it might provide that balance that some families are really looking for.
Do we know when we would start to see some of that work, so to speak?
I'm not sure. I would assume that there needs to be some scheduling pieces run at the high school, looking at would this actually work, and when would courses be offered, and some of those pieces. So could be a few months down the road. I'm not sure of Adam's timeline.
Yeah, I'll say, some of the issues at the high school involve students who are dismissed early for sports and other activities, missing classes at the end of the day, and it would be a larger time period. So those are things that I know need to be looked at, as well as preserving the 45-minute time period between when clubs are held after school, being able to preserve that with sports and other activities. So I think those are on the table as well as important issues to address.
It's okay. It was just a tap. You're totally fine.
So on
Okay. There might be more room on this end here, Laura. Yeah, John, Laura can sit right here.
for you?
Sorry, we just have new bring chairs.
Your chair.
We got a chair.
We got a chair for him.
Thank you.
Just to have a couple of comments for people's edification. We're not the only ones in the world who have done this. Yeah? Not in the state and not in the nation generally.
The state of California.
State of California just mandated it. So this is a real thing. And one of the things we discussed, I don't know if this came up, or the committee has done any work, but you'd let them know, about talking to nearby districts and doing it. So that's in work as well, those discussions.
Talking to nearby districts to see if they're going to do it?
No,
Or
if they're
talking to
meeting-
other districts around us that have?
Talking to other districts, the idea was to talk to other districts around us that haven't. And if the more districts that do it, the less of a burden it is to persuade athletic organizations to shift their programs to accommodate more schools who are going to this model.
There's definitely some talk with other districts that are, because there are other districts around us that are in the works and working on it as well, just like us.
Right.
So, different discussions.
Any other questions?
So I do have a question about the first part of the superintendent's report about the middle school. Was that an internal hire or was that an external hire for, I'm gonna put your
Dana?
last name so I won't say it.
Yeah, Dana was an external hire. He actually had been a principal at a high school, and he had resigned mid-year for some personal reasons, but was available and able to take on an interim role for this year. And he's hit the ground running and been doing a great job at AMS.
Okay. Is there any concern about a sort of getting caught up to speed type situation for
You
for
know,
that role?
it's interesting, I was there, and, you know, he jumped right in, with a lot, and interestingly, we had our, NELMS site visit the day after his first day, and, I was part of that NELMS site visit, they came,
Can you just say what?
Oh, yes. It's the New England League of Middle School. They came because AMS, and I probably can actually share this out tonight publicly, because Bethany has already shared with her staff. So NELMS came to look at the school and do a site visit because Bethany had applied to be a spotlight school through NELMS. And they just found out today that they they did receive that spotlight school status, which is a really challenging status to be able to achieve. So they are a spotlight school, and what that means is that NELM advertises them as, you know, that a school for people to come and visit and learn from because they're doing such great things. So I was at that site visit before for them to really learn about the school and determine whether or not they would be a spotlight school. And partway through, I was answering some questions, and they turned and asked Dina something, and he said, "I'm really sorry, but I can't answer that. This is my second day." And they're like, "Wait, your second day here?" And they were shocked because he had been giving them a tour of the school. He had been, you know, sharing a lot of information with them. So they were so impressed that it was literally the second day on the job for him, and they had no idea. So he has truly hit the ground running.
So just to piggyback on that, the role of this particular position that's changed, is it to cover a certain grade set? Is it to cover curriculum? Is it to cover discipline? Like what's their area of expertise?
So Dana is an assistant principal for operations, so he is covering that operations side, what Jesse was covering when Jesse was at AMS. So the role hasn't changed. Jesse moved from AMS to Clark Wilkins to provide some additional support there. There were some challenges with, you know, there's always a challenge with having the two buildings, both Clark and Wilkins, as well as a need for more support, certainly during recess time, and a little more oversight. So the decision was made to move Jesse over to Clark and to Wilkins for him to provide that level of support and to bring Dana on board to fill Jesse's position.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, where's Dana from?
He was, I believe, at Winnisquam High School. His resume's upstairs. But off the top of my head, pretty sure.
Great, thank you, Christine. Next up, we have individual board reports. So who wants to go first? Sarah? Sure. Sarah from Mount Vernon?
So, the Mont Vernon board met on the 9th of January. We had our budget hearing that evening. The budget that we presented was $5,520,142. That is 6.97% above fiscal year 20. Our default is 6.8% up. The reason for our very large number is because we have some special education challenges and needs that we need to meet, so that is the bulk of that number. We had some wonderful community participation at that meeting, some great questions. The budget committee overwhelmingly supports our budget, so that is a wonderful thing. We are hoping to get that passed. Our single warrant article is a $50,000 to take $50,000 from any unreserved fund balance to be able to put that towards our capital maintenance fund, which we've done and we've passed for the last few years just to help us prepare for any capital maintenance needs that are coming in the future. Our deliberative session is coming up on the 5th of February at 7 o'clock. And the only other really significant news from up the hill is that we have decided to stop the shuttle service that goes from the village school down to AMS in the high school. The ridership was simply too low and the cost a little bit too high, so we felt that it was a prudent move to go ahead and stop that service. So that stops, I believe, the 31st of January.
Thank you. That from Amherst School Board?
So we've met a couple times since our last SAU meeting. We've got, we spent a lot of time preparing for public hearing and then preparing for deliberative. We've also had our public hearing since then. We got, public hearing went great. We got a lot of feedback that we've been able to apply towards preparing for the deliberative session. Our budget is up 1.3% over last year. We're also asking for $300,000 to go into our capital reserve funds to help fund repairs at the schools that are needed over the next several years. This is going to be an ongoing maintenance program. And then we also got word the other day that our Ways and Means unanimously voted to approve all of our warrant articles. So we're really excited about that. Pretty much it.
Thank you. Any questions for that? No? All right, so Jim Manning, the Sohegan Board Chair, is not able to be here tonight, so Vice Chair Ken Bronster will give us an update on Sohegan. Take it away.
So on the 6th, we had our public hearing where we had introduced our 3 warrant articles, the first one being our budget, and that's $18,377,407, which is a 1.5% increase essentially over last year. And our default is just slightly less than that at $18,371,650. Our second warrant article is for our PPC agreement. It's a 4-year agreement, and it's really an opportunity for us to solve some of our pay inequities between more senior teachers. And our last warrant article is that, or to start a capital maintenance fund, and do that with $100,000. And we're going to try to expand that every year going forward, so we can maintain our capital equipment per schedule. We're also continuing to look at our new grading and reporting and how we're going to roll it out while minimizing any kind of impact to students and educators. It's something that there's been some struggles with, and trying to figure out the best way to move it forward, or maybe not. So there's still some things that we're looking at there. So in a nutshell, that's us.
Any questions for Ken?
Did you say, Ben, that you were starting a capital reserve fund or just adding money into for the facilities?
Sorry, we're adding.
So there's already one in place?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That was-
Do you know what the balance of that one is?
Yeah, it's about 250
Okay.
right now.
Thank
We're at.
That's more meant for emergency funds.
Yeah, no, it's,
And this was supposed to be more for capital
Yeah.
equipment, and what we know is going to be our maintenance.
Sure.
moving forward.
Are you funding that from an unreserved fund?
No, that's a separate warrant.
Separate warrant.
We're returning all, we're not gonna worry about trying to take it out of capital, out of any surplus funds at this point, since we don't know what we'll have.
Any other questions?
Just one last question. Do you guys know how costly the power situation was?
I don't actually. Do you
Yeah,
happen to
we're
know?
still working on that. There have been repairs that have been made. As you heard this evening, there's still some residual challenges with the control system, so that's being worked on. But I do know that folks worked very quickly, and we were very fortunate to have just one day out of school, and we were back up and running, and all systems go, so.
So is there a
We're
ballpark?
compiling that cost, and we are tracking what the total cost of that is.
Yeah, we have a board meeting next week, so I'm sure we'll probably get some more information on it.
Are we talking like a $10,000 problem, or are we talking like a $150,000 problem?
No and no, a
Between.
little more than 10, much less than 100.
Significant, but not as much as we actually were concerned it could have been.
Yeah, we're very fortunate with the way things worked out, that we were able to have some repairs made. But it did raise our curiosity about the other buildings, and so we're going to be implementing a process to both load test the generators at the other facilities and look at the age of the main circuit breakers at the other facilities as well.
Does anyone know whether or not those pieces were included in our 20-year capital assessment?
I do know, and the answer is no.
The answer is
Yeah, yeah, we actually looked at that the other night. All right, so, thank you, everyone. Moving on to committee updates. Anyone have an update from their respective committees? I know we did talk about later school start times. Christine talked about the principal search. I have an update on the committee, but are there others?
I would say just a quick word on policy. We continue to meet. The administration is doing a really good job of bringing to our attention high priority needs, so that is governing our agenda. And so we met a couple weeks ago, and we're going to meet again next month. And as we get through our process, we'll bring them here, and then they'll filter down to the individual boards, as has been the normal process over the last few years.
So, I'll give an update on the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, that's our new name. So that is a group of a wide variety of stakeholders. We have student, we have parents, we have board members, we have community members. So we are tackling, looking at the capital maintenance needs and facilities of Amherst and Sohegan. So we are looking at the capital needs assessments that were done in 2017. We're looking at Sohegan 2.0. We're looking at, we're waiting for the Amherst study that will hopefully be done if all goes well with your budget. And we're also looking at a 20-year normalization schedule that Adam did, which resulted in the capital maintenance funding requests that are on the Sohegan Amherst warrants. So that's the 100,000 that Tim spoke about in Sohegan, and yours is 300,000. And that was done really because we want to have a normalized tax burden for the taxpayers, so that we're not looking at, 1 year we have needs of, a very small amount, and the next year we have needs of a large amount. So this was a way to normalize that tax burden. So this committee is looking at all of those documents and looking to have the two districts work together to ascertain the facilities and capital needs of both districts going forward. So we've had 2 meetings so far. It's a great group. We're splitting into subcommittees. So it's been, we have one of the older gentlemen who was involved in building the high school who's involved. So some other folks who've been in town for a long time, and then younger parents also. So it's, I'm excited for the work, and I think we're gonna have some good information for the school community, taxpayers, boards, parents, and students. So, any questions on that? Yeah.
That work is also being done with conjunction with the town representatives to merge those needs with town needs as well, is that right?
Yeah, so Steve could probably talk more about, is that you're talking about CIP?
Yeah, and just, the town has their own projects, we have our projects, but at the end of the day, all the tax burden falls in the same tax
It
base.
does,
So
yes,
that was a thing we had talked about for some time, is for at least having the discussion between the two governing boards, so that whatever those plans were, that A, they were known, and B, they could be coordinated to the extent feasible to,
Yes.
again, normalize tax burdens on an ongoing basis.
So we do have representatives from the SAU who volunteered to be on various committees for that process with the town. I don't know if any folks who volunteered have heard back from the town yet. No, I know Terry is sort of spearheading, organizing that, so we could check with her if she comes tonight. But I know that there is work, she's not, okay. I know that there is work that is beginning. And
Are you conflating the town master plan?
oh, yeah, I am, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No money in the town
I'm
master
sorry.
plan, different group,
Yeah, yeah,
different objective.
yeah, I am. So, yeah, but I guess it's all similar with us trying to work with the town as far as projects going forward. So, do you have any update on CIP, Steve, or?
The CIP is a once-a-year event where all of the spenders in the town of Amherst, schools and town departments, project major capital projects for the next 5 years.
Okay.
So that's, so it's got our annual contributions for the maintenance of capital assets in there. It has a very ballpark out on the horizon, large sum of money for a new school on there. It's just used as a tool to attempt to level tax impacts over the years. It's not binding on any of the contributors. The planning board can use it to assess development impact fees from developers. So last Wednesday, the planning board accepted the capital improvement plan from the capital improvement plan committee. So now the numbers are the official document for them to use any way they want until we do the whole game again next spring.
Got it, okay.
Spring isn't far away, is it?
So that's the CIP, and then master plan is
And that's why it's just,
the other work.
it's more zoning regulation.
Yeah.
Wish list kind of thing.
Right, thanks for keeping me honest.
And for the master planning, we're at the point, those of us that volunteer for that are waiting to hear back from the town of when meetings will be and the
Okay.
organization of that.
Yeah,
So we said we're interested, but
you haven't heard back yet, so we can check in with Terry and see.
yeah.
Okay. Great, okay, so moving on to the consent agenda. Had a chance to take a look at that. I would entertain a motion.
Make the motion to accept the consent agenda.
A motion by Beth, is there a second?
Steve?
You first?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, great, so that passed unanimously. So next up, we have the first reading of policy KFA, public conduct on school property. So I don't know if either John or Christine, you want to explain that to the board?
Yeah, it's, just as we were going through our policies, one that we were updating, we didn't make too many changes from the sample policy that we were provided with, and, felt really comfortable, with this policy. I don't know if you have anything
Yeah,
else, John?
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve?
Just to add to that,
Yeah.
I think one like this exists in the districts already. It doesn't exist in the SAU, but it needs to because the SAU has property as well. So we'll be adding to the SAU. And I think the biggest change I recall is we added vaping to the list of prohibited activities.
Yep. I think that was probably our only change to this policy, if I'm remembering correctly.
Any other questions on this policy? This is a first reading.
First reading for SAU, and then we're looking.
Are we looking to send this to the individual boards?
Yes.
Okay. So, discussion?
Pretty straightforward.
All right, so I guess I would be looking for a motion to send this to the individual boards.
I'll make that motion.
And a second? John, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Great, thank you. Okay, next up, we have a presentation by Christine on teacher leader effectiveness, or an update, I guess.
Yeah, more of an update.
Okay.
So when I had provided an update a few months ago, it was requested that I share out quarterly where we are with our teacher evaluations. And we're in a year where we're about halfway through our evaluations, which is great, but we're also changing our cycle this year. You might remember that our cycle actually ends at the end of February. So while we're about halfway done with our evaluations, we actually have to end our cycle early this year and then continue, and then start fresh on March 1st. So our principals and assistant principals are working really hard to try to get even more than half done, even though we're only halfway through the school year, to really accelerate that process as we then go and start our next cycle. So this is a kind of in-between time where we're really getting off cycle with our evaluations. You might remember that we used to run our evaluations from September to June, but that doesn't help when we're having our renewal conversations. We want to be able to talk about our observations so that we want them done earlier. So we worked really hard to make sure that we've gotten our new teachers completed. That was a big focus, and also to make sure we're focusing on our formal observations especially with our new teachers. But when we start fresh on March 1st, that's going to be the first time we'll have that new cycle, and it's going to be easier for us to track because we're working with a shortened timeline this year with our observation cycle. But most buildings are right around 50% complete at this point, and we are about halfway through the year.
So is that 50% complete with informal and formal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're lumped together as, elements basically.
Any questions for Christine?
Can you remind me again how many formal evaluations happen in a year?
Per
the staff.
Yeah, so it depends on the staff member. If you are and I'm doing this off the top of my head, it's not in front of me, so hopefully I'm correct. So for a teacher that is a tenured teacher, it's once in their 3-year recertification cycle. And then for teachers new to the district, they actually will have either 1 or 2 formal observations, depending on how things are going. It can be 1 formal and 4 informals, or it could be 2 formals and 3 informals. And then that decreases as they continue with us down to that 1 formal. But teachers new to the district who aren't continuing contract do get at least 1 formal observation a year, which also, significant amount of time, but important to be spending that time with our newer teachers. But it does take, it's a full 45-minute observation. You do a pre-observation conference before, and you do have a full post-observation conference as well with teachers. We have a significant number of newer teachers that aren't on a continuing contract. So I know we spoke at one of the last Amherst board meetings. Close to half of the AMS staff is non-continuing contract, and actually Clark Wilkins has higher numbers of non-continuing contract than I thought. So I believe there's somewhere around 27 non-continuing contract teachers at AMS, and 23 or 24 at Clark Wilkins. So significant number, and there's been a lot of retirees in the past few years. So it is a big push to make sure that we get those completed to be able to provide that strong feedback to teachers.
So this is used as part of the renewal to
Yes.
determining whether teachers are renewed or not. So my question is, are you going to be able to get the rest of them done by the end of February? And number two, what's the plan in place if you don't do that, where you have teachers that haven't been evaluated, and how much of a factor is this in their renewal? Because if you don't evaluate them, how can you give them an honest renewal on a shortened cycle if
Yeah.
you didn't get to them?
So we made sure that we focused on our newer teachers and our teachers that are non-continuing contract, and while 50% are done, that does mean we looked to prioritize those newer teachers and to have multiple observations of those newer teachers. There are many newer teachers that all of their observations are done to date. So I didn't break it up by newer, continuing contract and non-continuing contract. Because we were off cycle this year and we have a shortened cycle, it was a little bit harder. We also made changes to our observation forms, so we weren't able to start, right in September with our observations. We didn't really start until October, so that is a pretty short timeline. But we feel really confident that we focused on our new teachers, and that's really where we spent time, and now our principals are really focusing on trying to get as many of the rest done as possible.
But I would assume that if you have most of your new teachers done, that number of new teachers is still considerably less than 50% of the overall workforce, correct? So there's going to be a large number potentially that don't have any sort of evaluation, we presume, or is it, what percentage do you think you'll get to that will at least have something on the books?
The goal would be for, us to have at least one observation done of all of our staff members, and then as many our goal obviously is to get them all done, and our principals are really in a push now to try to finish them, but they also they want to make sure they're meaningful and effective. And with newer staff, you're in so often. The other piece too, we've also heard from our principals that what's challenging is they're in classrooms every single day. They're just not always writing it up. So, but it's really important for that write-up to be there for the staff member to understand what those expectations are, where they can improve. So that's really that just formalizing that feedback is the important piece about it. So, I feel pretty strongly that we have the information we need to be making those renewal decisions, because that's where principals and assistant principals have focused their time on our non-continuing contract teachers. So we will have, be working to get as many of those observations done by the end of February as we can.
And I assume that you've gone, sorry, Beth, I didn't take your hand raised, but I assume that you've gone back to the teachers that are due to have one in the 3 years, they've kind of followed suit after the new teachers. You have some sort of priority ranking order?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so our priority has been new teachers, and then our priority has been formal observations. So if you have, that teacher, you don't want to miss a formal observation of a teacher that only happens once every 3 years. So that, that has been that priority order. Once we complete this cycle, we can certainly share, exactly where we fell, and I'm happy also to break it down by continuing contract teachers or non-continuing contract teachers. I'm also happy to break out by formals and informals. I don't know what is helpful information.
Yeah, I would love to have some data on, because you have to remind all of us how many you're supposed to do, because I know it's different for new teachers.
Yeah.
So, some really good data that shows us what the, objective is in terms of numbers, and then how many were done. And then also, I would love to have some sort of way to know that it's being effective.
Yes.
So, having, showing that it's helping teachers to improve their practice. So I'm not sure how you can demonstrate that, but I think that's really the overall purpose of it. So, and are there teachers who end up unfortunately being put on performance plans, and how have these evaluations helped to improve their practice and get them off of improvement plans? So that would be information that I would be looking for. And I'll get to you, Beth, this before you, sorry.
I was actually just gonna ask, I specifically asked how many formal evaluations, but I think we also need the full picture of, for the tenured teachers, how many informal evaluations? Just so we're not saying they get one and that's it, which means they haven't, none
I'm
of
sorry,
them
they do have, yes, informal.
So I guess that, well, no, but I didn't ask that, so
Yeah.
you really answered my question, but Tom's questions made me realize we should really explicitly ask, so everybody's aware right now. The tenured teachers, how many, on average, how many, informal evaluations do they get a year?
I believe we just changed that, and I think it's 2.
Okay.
Let's see if I can fill in that quickly. I'm pretty sure it is. I think that was one of the changes we made. Do you remember, Steve?
I'm almost positive. I was wrong earlier, so.
I have it right here. Hold on. So, continuing contract is that 1 formal observation every 3 years and 2 informals each year.
Okay.
Except when you are in year 3 with your formal observation, it's 1 formal, 1 informal. So basically, they always have 2 a year. If you're in years 1 through 3, it's 2 formal observations per year, but that 1 formal can be replaced with an additional informal. Depending on, if you go through that formal observation cycle and it was a very strong observation with, only a little bit of feedback, what you're following up with is, are they implementing that feedback? And you can see that in informal observations as well. In years 4 and 5, it's 1 formal observation per year and then 3 informals each year.
Steve? No more.
Yeah, back to Tom's question about getting it all done by the magic deadline for the
Yeah.
monogamy. This year is just like every other year. Yep. So for forever, we've been on a September 1st to June 30th cycle, and by the time the non-renewal decision deadline point came around, we would have somewhere between half and 2/3 of the teachers evaluated. And the rest would happen in the spring after that drop dead date. The big change is for next year. We're making an explicit decision that we're going to start the year on March 1st and be sure to get everything done by February 28th or 29th, depending on the year, so that we know that all the evaluations for a year's worth of evaluation for all teachers will happen before the decision date for non-renewals.
Yes.
So it was sort of slid the window without really changing the number of observations or when they're going to happen, so that we have current ones at the decision point. So someone who will be evaluated in mid-April, the impact of that in terms of renew non-renew isn't felt until next April.
I understand how it works, but it's still, by doing that, if you're missing teachers, there's an accountability factor that is missing, which I think is probably an important part of the renewal process. So yes, you want to have it done, but there's, with a 4-month window, you started late, you're ending it early. I just hope that there's, plan in place to, to be able to get to as many of those, because it's a big accountability piece that's missing by shifting it to 1 year. While it's only 1 year, it's still a teacher that is going to be on payroll in a school that didn't have any sort of, review or observation this year. So that's my only concern with that.
Mm-hmm.
I get the principle of it. I think the principle is right, but in that first year we are switching. It's important to make sure you have that plan to get everybody still.
Laura?
How many each year do you not renew? Like you're evaluating all these teachers and when it all comes down to their reviews.
So that's a case-by-case basis. We look at whether that teacher has made progress throughout the year, how that teacher is doing, and if we feel that that teacher's not a good fit, or hasn't made progress or met expectations, then we would individually. So every year is different. Sometimes, we could go 5 years without a non-renewal, and then there can be a year where we have 2 or 3 teachers who are not renewing.
How many last year?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. I was just wondering, like, specifically to our district, how many are not being renewed, and that would be something that would be interesting.
Adam should be able to share that when he brings his renewals forward, if you wanted to know in previous years.
It would be by the individuals.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, Sarah?
I just wanted to add that last year in Mount Vernon, we asked our principal to add his observation status to his principal's report. So every meeting we get an update, like we know from last meeting that he's completed 30 informals, there's 49 remaining. His formals, he's completed 17 and has 1 remaining as of that last one. So it's just helpful information. We found that it was good to kind of keep track. So I know your districts are larger, but maybe you want to ask your principals to add that information. It'd be helpful.
Any other questions for Christine? No? Okay, great, thank you. All right, next up is superintendent goal setting. So unfortunately, Adam is not here tonight. We were, just to refresh everyone's memory, following our evaluation, we decided to go through a more formal goal setting process with the SAU. So I had asked him to start us off with having him provide us with what the goals that he had presented to the SAU for including the strategic vision and facilities to start us off. So I don't have that unfortunately tonight, but my thought was that we create a Google Sheet where I can populate that with his goals and board members can also input. We can't have a discussion in there, but you can input your other ideas for goals and then we can use that as a document for discussion at the next SAU board meeting. The idea is to have a lot of this fleshed out towards the end of this cycle, so that we have a good place to adopt board goals for when we have the new board set after the election. So, does that make sense to folks to sort of, I feel like we need a starting point rather than everyone just sort of throwing out goals. So I think it's important to have the goals that Adam has identified, but it's also important for us to have our goals in there as well. So I will work to get a Google Doc out to everybody shortly, and we can start to populate that. And then again, just a reminder, don't have discussions with folks since we're not in a working meeting. Any questions on that, or does that make sense? Any suggestions or? Makes sense? Right, great. Thank you, everyone. Next up, we have public comment number 2. Anyone from the public who'd like to address the board? Oh, Tony first, you can come on up, or actually, Shannon, can you get Tony?
I can now.
Okay.
I would like to clarify that the cold classrooms comment is not just cold classrooms, but there is a climate control issue at the school where my morning classes are sometimes 40 degrees for days on end when it is negative degrees outside. And those classrooms would be identified as room 129, room 229, and room 230. So if that can be fixed, I would love that. And also, my other classrooms later in the day for my advisory are 80 degrees with the windows open because that is energy efficient to my knowledge. And also it's a sauna in there, and we also do feel tired because, heat feels good. So there is a issue during the winter, especially with the heating and cooling system.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that needs to be passed on to the admin, facilities manager, and addressed. So, and we should probably talk about that since it's specifically Subhegan, talk about that. But no, I'm happy to have you comment here. Tony, that's fine. So yeah, so we'll bring that up at the Subhegan board meeting. Thank you. And Stephanie?
I know we're not supposed to engage the public, but as a parent, I would be concerned that that's been going on or a couple of years or a couple of days. Like, what's the reporting mechanism for a faculty member to bring it to their supervisor? My classroom's at 40 degrees in the morning. What's going on, and why does somebody have to come to a school board to address something like that?
Yeah.
So,
I'll just share that this is the first that I'm hearing.
Yeah, so-
I made a note of the
But-
rooms, and I assure you I will follow up to find out
Yeah,
As
just
you're curious, what?
Like
Yeah,
maybe
as a
you can
board
talk
member,
to-
I haven't heard that.
if it's happening in our building, if it's happening in the middle school, if it's happening at the high school, the building administrator should be aware of that stuff and making remedies to correct it.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie?
Nah, I got you.
Got me?
I got
Okay.
you.
Yeah,
360.
I'll reiterate, I know my daughter has a class that they literally, when they have to work on groups, will sit in the hallway because it's so cold in the classroom, it's warmer out in the hallway, and they wear their jackets, so there's definitely an issue.
I'm just curious, is this new this year? Because my son graduated last year, I never heard about this,
I-
but.
Really?
I know there's rooms that are hot that I heard about in the prior years. This is the first I've heard about the cold,
The
but
cold.
I think because she's in a different grade level now, that she's in different parts of the building.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's been an ongoing issue, but I know the teachers are aware of it, and they've said things to people. I don't know who the people are, right? Then, so who knows how it's getting addressed. But that leads to one of my things about the whole capital improvement thing. And so I know there's a capital improvement committee, and I know right now there's priority with Amherst and talking about either looking at having the school refurbished, new school, whatever needs to be done, getting the facilities planning, and there's talk of putting off working on Sohegan because of some of this. But high school, I mean, we're not doing a whole lot with Sohegan. We're holding off for Sohegan 2.0. There are things at that high school that need fixed, and if you want your students, your high achieving students, to do well in a school system where kids walk in or families walk in, you need to do something about it, and you can't just prioritize one school system over the other, although I know there's a hard balance. We can't leave the high school off to the later time. I heard 7 years wait to do much at the high school. That's scary to me.
Where'd that come from?
Well, when I was sitting at the facility meeting, they're saying, well, when would Sohegan 2.0? Well, it would be after the evaluation of Amherst, and then you could talk about a bond issue, and you're talking 3 years, and you're talking about building a new school, that's 5 years out. Then you're gonna go talk about Sohegan?
I don't know if that's.
That's what I got, so I'm a little concerned. I think we need to clarify.
Which meeting was that at?
The joint facility meeting that I was at over at the Learning Common, when you were talking about, it was like a whole bunch of people, but with Amherst and Sohegan there, and they were talking about putting forward and getting the bond issue for whatever might be needed for Amherst School District and the timing, and then you were going to talk about doing more at the high school.
So
That's
we have
5 to 7 years out.
Yeah, no, so we have and Tim and I are on this committee, with, the committee that I spoke about earlier, the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, and that has not been discussed, so
Okay.
we are.
Because $100,000 isn't a whole lot that's gonna help high school.
So that's why we have the committee, so we can figure out what are the capital things that need to happen within the two districts, so we can
Right.
coordinate those activities, not delay activities.
Okay, so I wanna make sure we're not
There's no
waiting.
plan to, the idea is.
It sounded like waiting versus.
Yeah, no, I mean, the idea is we have, we all live in this town,
Mhm.
and we have needs in various facilities.
Yep. It's been
And
needed
we
for years.
can't ask the taxpayers to fund various amounts at various times, and there's lots of different ways to do things. So there's a lot of moving parts, so
Mhm.
that's why this committee is charged with taking a look at that and coming up with the plan that makes the most sense for both districts,
Mhm.
not sacrificing one district over the other.
Yeah,
So we all live in the same town.
I just wanna make sure
so-
we're not waiting. That was my concern. I keep hearing where money is going to be spent. I know there's a coordination, but I'm just concerned.
That might have been said in error at that time, it hasn't been discussed that way since, so.
Okay, all right,
So
good to know.
Thank you for bringing it up, though.
Yes. One more piece. Strategic vision. So I was at a meeting where Adam presented the strategic vision to one of the area groups. Then I've talked to multiple parents in multiple different situations, and they have absolutely no idea there is a new strategic vision. They have no idea what is being discussed at the SU. Granted, they could watch these, but I would love to see that there's meetings or presentations held either at every school or at least 2 or 3 times, and invite the parents, not from the SAU Facebook site. You need to send a text out like you do with Nixle or everything else and tell people about 2 or 3 nights they can come and they can hear about the vision, because they have no clue of what's going on. And there's some dramatic changes talking about going at the high school. And they need to know. They need to have a voice, or at least someone needs to have a discussion going, because they were shocked when I told them what was being talked about. So that's a concern of mine.
Yeah, certainly, pass that on to Adam. I know he's been going around town, but certainly going to the schools would make a lot of sense. So, thank you. Yes.
I just would like to piggyback on what she had said. I mean, I had a great conversation with Christine the other day about rolling out of the grading system. And I've heard comments from basically a lot of parents and a lot of teachers that they are quite frustrated with the way in which it was presented to them or not presented. And I think Christine and I had a good chat and very positive. That it would be something that needs to be attended to in a very different fashion. And I do support what the young lady just said a moment ago about the Nixle. That Nixle is a very precious item on my phone, and I use it all the time. So I do have grandkids in the community. I've raised 6 children of my own, 4 which went through the school system. So I am a very concerned parent and grandparent, and I believe that I take great pride in the fact that I was an educator. I also was on the Board of Education in North Smithfield, Rhode Island, so I know a lot about boards and how they function, and I'd like to have a greater voice in all the boards in Amherst.
Thank you. Very good suggestions. Appreciate it. Anyone else from the public? No? Okay, thank you. That actually concludes our public session of the meeting. We do have.
So just one quick question.
Sure.
In terms of our next scheduled meeting for this,
Yeah.
we're going to do this after the election and do an organizational meeting in March, or we're going to meet in February?
I think we're gonna have to meet in February.
Okay.
So, I will get together with Adam and Abby and get something out to you guys as soon as possible. So,
Okay.
but yeah, we will need to have a meeting.
I have a question. The 4 chairs meetings that you've been having with Elizabeth and Sarah and yourself and Jim to discuss the strategic vision or whatever you're discussing, where can I find minutes for those? I know that we can't all be there because it's a quorum, but I would, as a board member, like to be more aware of what was discussed and.
So I don't think they're public meetings.
And that really is the strategic vision.
No, their primary purpose now is agenda setting and planning for our meetings, so that we are all aware of what's gonna be on each other's agenda, so. But you can certainly talk to your board chair to get any information about what was discussed. There's nothing, that couldn't be shared, certainly.
Right, I just feel that it should be public to make people aware of something as important as trying to steer the SAU39 entirely. Certainly, that would make a priority.
But
That's not the
that's
purpose
not
of
the
the meeting.
function of that at all.
But I think the perception is that it very well could be the function of that, or that type of business could go on, so I would second and again, I don't know what the RSA say, but it does seem that it's, that perception could be there, that, especially now that we're talking about it now, and, certainly on the public record at this point, that perception could certainly be there.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to Adam about the legalities of that. They're primarily for agenda setting and getting our meetings planned, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't post something, but we don't really have minute takers or, I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that, Steve? As our
Well,
historian?
It's purely an administrative function meeting, no decisions are made, there's no decision-making authority in that room. There's no binding decisions are made in time to any board. So and then always been like, let's just get our act, us the chairs, get our act together so that everything's getting covered someplace, either the SAU meetings, the board meetings, and they're coordinated, there are decisions that have impact on one board to another. It's a mechanics meeting. That's
It
what it
really
is.
is, but it's not, definitely not a steering committee for the SAU. I would not characterize it that way at all. So we can bring it up again, I can talk to Adam and. All right, so I will need a motion to go into non-public.
I'll make a motion.
Ken, is there a second?
I'll second.
John?
Keith, yes.
Hancock, yes?
Lawrence, yes.
Lawson, yes.
Casey, yes.
Glover, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Gothier, yes?
Taylor, yes.
Thank you, everyone.